Was a king's victory truly worth a princess's life? Could a nation's glory drown in a sea of corpses? The rain hammered against the stone walls of Calais, a relentless drumbeat mirroring the tension within the English camp. 1347. The air, thick with the stench of sweat, wood smoke, and desperation, held a strange, brittle optimism. Edward the Black Prince, a man sculpted from granite and ambition, surveyed the impossible siege. 26,000 men, a glittering, terrifying army, choked the narrow approaches to the French fortress. It was, undeniably, a landmark moment. Not just for England, but for the very way wars were fought. Gone were the days of haphazard levies and brute force. Edward's army was a machine, honed by years of meticulous planning, driven by professional soldiers, and fueled by a ruthless efficiency. Yet, as he looked out at the faces of his men, grim, determined, and utterly exhausted, a chilling thought crept into his mind. Victory here wasn't guaranteed. The whispers started subtly, carried on the wind like the scent of impending rain. King John of Bohemia, the blind king, a tragic hero echoing Sir Giles d'Argentine from Bannockburn, had fallen at Crécy, a truly spectacular, if utterly pointless, death. He'd asked to be led into the thick of battle, a defiant gesture of nobility in the face of certain doom. His body, roped to his comrades, became a gruesome, inspiring symbol of courage. 2 dukes, 4 counts, a horrifying tally of fallen nobility, each given honorable burials by the victorious English. It was a brutal lesson. Even the most powerful could be reduced to dust. Crécy itself was a thunderclap of a battle. The French, confident in their chivalry and the supposed superiority of their knights, were utterly unprepared for the English's new tactics. Longbowmen, raining arrows down like a biblical plague, decimated the French cavalry. Hand-to-hand combat, brutal and chaotic, saw English foot soldiers mowing down their aristocratic opponents. Edward, observing from a distance, sent a boastful letter back to Parliament. The whole host of France has been laid low. The news spread like wildfire, carried by the swift-footed Dominican friars, the royal government's traveling newsmen. A thundering, wonderful victory, as one chronicler put it. Tangible rewards for a people who had endured years of hardship and crippling taxes. Propaganda, of course, but effective propaganda nonetheless. Then, just a few months later, Ralph Neville, Henry Percy, and William Zouch, names that would soon become synonymous with English defiance, crushed a massive Scottish invasion at Neville's Cross. 4 Scottish earls, the Marshal, the Chamberlain, and the Constable, all captured. Even the formidable Earl of Moray, a senior Scottish nobleman, fell in the melee. Almost the entire Scottish military leadership vanished in a single, terrifying day. King David II, the young Scottish king, was captured and imprisoned for 11 years. It was a display of English dominance so complete, so overwhelming that it felt almost unsettling, but Edward wasn't celebrating. He knew that victory at Crécy and Neville's Cross hadn't settled the war. The problem wasn't the French or the Scots, it was the very nature of his kingdom. His army, capable of crushing entire armies, hadn't won the hearts of the Normans. Normandy, the ancestral homeland of the Plantagenets, remained stubbornly resistant to English rule. Philip VI, the Duke of Normandy, was humiliated, but he wasn't broken. He was merely regrouping, plotting, waiting for an opportunity. Edward's victory was a tactical triumph, but a political stalemate. The siege of Calais followed, a grueling test of endurance and a showcase of Plantagenet ambition. Almost 26,000 men, a truly staggering number, descended upon the fortified town. Every English earl, save for 4 elderly or infirm ones, participated. The financial strain was immense. New goods and export taxes were levied, sparking grumbling amongst the English populace. But Calais was more than just a strategic asset, it was a symbol. A foothold in France, a testament to Edward's power, and a constant reminder of the unresolved conflict. Inside the walls of Calais, the situation was desperate. The defenders, outnumbered and starving, resorted to eating saddle leather. A desperate measure, but a testament to their resilience. Philip VI, attempting to lure the English into a pitched battle, brought his armies close, hoping to provoke a decisive engagement. But Edward, wary of a trap, refused to commit. Finally, in October 1347, the defenders, realizing their situation was hopeless, surrendered. Not with a glorious charge, but with a chilling display of submission. A deputation of citizens emerged, wearing nooses around their necks, a symbolic gesture of their utter subjugation. Edward, surprisingly, allowed Queen Philippa to plead for mercy. The nooses were removed, but Calais remained in English hands for over 2 centuries, a chilling reminder of the price of defiance. Edward returned to England as a conquering hero, bathed in the adoration of his people, but his triumph was shadowed by a deeper tragedy. The years 1346 and 1347 witnessed not just battles and sieges, but the arrival of a silent, invisible enemy, the Black Death. It swept across Europe with terrifying speed, carried by rats and fleas from the Silk Road. It began in the East, a horrifying plague that spread along trade routes, transforming into a pandemic that decimated populations. Back in England, the summer of 1348 was surprisingly glorious. The king had returned in triumph, Calais was secure, and the Scottish threat had been effectively neutralized. The royal family and the country celebrated with lavish pageantry. Masks and costumes, a chaotic spectacle of aristocratic revelry. The king, dressed as a giant bird, and his knights adorned in peacock feathers, a deliberate display of chivalry and perhaps a subtle assertion of dominance. He even paraded his captured prisoners in high style, including King David II of Scotland and the nobility of Paris, a grotesque, glittering pageant of power. The Plantagenet family was expanding, both in size and influence. Edward, at 35, was a formidable warrior and a shrewd politician. His wife, Queen Philippa, 2 years his junior, was a gracious and intelligent queen. But they already had 9 children, a daunting prospect for any royal couple. Edward of Woodstock, the Black Prince, the eldest son, was a war hero in his own right, a warrior at heart. Lionel of Antwerp was betrothed to an heiress in Ulster. John of Gaunt and Edmund of Langley were younger, still developing their skills, but Edward's ambitions extended beyond England. He envisioned a future where his children were intertwined with the most powerful families in Europe. He began to weave a complex web of dynastic marriages, seeking to solidify Plantagenet influence across the continent. Eleanor, Henry II's daughter, had married Alfonso VIII of Castile, and her granddaughter, also named Eleanor, had become a beloved queen in England. It was a connection that Edward hoped to leverage. His second daughter, Joan, was to marry Peter, son of King Alfonso XI of Castile. A strategically brilliant match, one that would bring the Plantagenets closer to the Iberian Peninsula. The preparations for Joan's departure were elaborate, a testament to the splendor of the Plantagenet court. Her wedding dress, 450 feet of rakematized silk, interwoven with gold thread, was a breathtaking display of wealth and extravagance. A talented Spanish minstrel was sent as a gift, 2 royal officials accompanied her, and 100 royal archers guarded her passage. Even in the midst of war, the Plantagenets maintained a carefully cultivated image of power and refinement. But even as the tournament season reached its peak, a dark cloud gathered on the horizon. A warning arrived from Bordeaux: the town was gripped by the plague. Andrew Ulford, a veteran of Crécy, contracted the disease and died. Then Princess Joan herself succumbed to the illness, her life extinguished before she could even begin her new journey. And just days later, Edward's infant son, William of Windsor, died. The king was devastated, struck by a double blow of personal tragedy. The Black Death descended upon England with terrifying speed, transforming the landscape of life and death. Villages were wiped out, populations decimated. The chronicler Henry Knighton wrote of a savage attack on the coastal areas, describing a world consumed by death. The plague spared no one, regardless of faith or social standing. It was a brutal reminder of humanity's vulnerability. Edward, despite his personal grief, continued to rule with unwavering resolve. He ordered quarantines, imposed restrictions on travel, and sought to understand the nature of the disease, but he couldn't stop it. The Black Death was a force of nature, an unstoppable tide of destruction. As the kingdom mourned its dead, Edward prepared for the future, for his children, for the continuation of the Plantagenet dynasty. On St. George's Day, April 23, 1349, he hosted a tournament at Windsor Castle, a defiant celebration of chivalry and strength in the face of overwhelming adversity. The knights of the realm gathered, a glittering assembly of warriors and nobles. Among them was the Earl of Salisbury, Edward's cousin, and his wife, Joan of Kent, who were married to each other. The tournament became a spectacle of skill and bravery, a temporary distraction from the horrors unfolding across the land. But even amidst the jousting and the festivities, the shadow of the Black Death lingered. The tournament was a reminder of the fragility of life, a stark contrast to the Plantagenets' ambition and their desire for glory. Edward, the Black Prince, watched his knights compete, his mind preoccupied with the future, with the need to secure his dynasty's legacy. He knew that the war with France was far from over, that the threat of the Scots remained, and that the Black Death would continue to ravage Europe. Yet he also recognized the importance of maintaining a facade of strength and stability. The tournament, the celebrations, the lavish displays of wealth, they were all part of a carefully crafted strategy, a way to reassure his people, to project an image of confidence, and to remind them that the Plantagenets were still in control. As the sun set over Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the tournament grounds, Edward turned his gaze towards the horizon, towards the uncertain future. He was a king burdened by responsibility, a warrior haunted by loss, and a leader determined to preserve his dynasty in a world consumed by chaos and death. Was a king's victory truly worth a princess's life? The answer, it seemed, was lost in the swirling mists of history, a tragic footnote in the annals of the 100 Years' War. Could a nation's glory drown in a sea of corpses? The Black Death, a silent, insidious enemy, had proven that even the most powerful kingdoms were vulnerable to forces beyond their control. And as Edward watched his daughter's ship sail away, carrying her to a distant land, he knew that the future of the Plantagenets and of England was uncertain.